Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Political Power Ranker. Chris Berg, the director of political for Nexstar Media Group, and Spencer Kimball. Where are you from again, Spence?
We're up here in Boston. We got a little bit more snow.
You do have a little bit more snow. I'm hanging out in Nashville this week, so my weather's a little bit better than yours. But I'm closer to where we're polling this week than you are, and I love the state of Georgia.
Yeah, Georgia's on our mind this week, and we are going to take a look at some Senate races and gubernatorial elections. As you can see here in Georgia, we pulled this race over the last couple of days, 1,000 people in the sample. We use online and the texting mobile primarily for our data collection. And remember, these are of likely voters in the Democratic and Republican primaries, and then likely voters for the general election as well. So a little bit more of a partisan makeup than in a general population survey.
Got it. And we've got a couple big races going on down there. You've got a Senate race that the Republicans think they have a shot at unseating the incumbent, and you've got a governor's race that's wide open. But we want to take the Senate race first. And what did you find?
Yeah, let's jump into that race. This is going to be going against Jon Ossoff for the right to go against Senator Ossoff there in Georgia. And you've got Mike Collins with a pretty strong lead at 30%, Buddy Carter at 16, and Derek Dooley at 10. We're going to talk a little bit about how the different lanes that these candidates are running in, but the general takeaway was Collins is doing better with older voters, and those voters over 50 vote at a higher propensity, and he's around 33% there. So we're going to have to watch to see if the other candidates can bring him down a little bit, or if he potentially could run away with the race.
We have an interesting makeup of the top tier candidates. You got a couple congressmen who have been in the office for a few years, not too long. Collins there for about 10, and then a fairly newly minted a congressman in Representative Carter, and then a football coach. With a big name though, with a name that is dominant in football lore in Georgia. And to talk more about these three guys, we've got a man who knows all, who's been doing political reporting for years in Georgia, Chuck Williams. Chuck from WRBL in Columbus. Hello, Chuck.
Hey, Chris, how are you? Coach
I,
Dooley's problem is he coached Tennessee, not Georgia. His dad coached Georgia.
exactly, Tennessee and Louisiana Tech, but not been a Georgia football head coach. But he was on looks like on his dad's staff for a little bit. So
He
he kind
was.
of,
I think he played at UVA.
right, right. Well, let's go back to the race and talk about these guys. And give me about a minute or 30 seconds on each one of the candidates. We'll start with Congressman Collins first.
Congressman Collins is very much a pro-Trump congressman. He has been part of the MAGA movement from the get-go. He has used the issue of immigration pretty successfully with the Laken Riley Act, and Laken Riley, the Georgia nursing student who was killed a couple of years ago by an immigrant. He has used that issue and passed legislation on that issue. So he has worked the immigration piece of this effectively, but where does that go from here? He comes from a political family. His father, Matt Collins, was a congressman, so it's in the genes. Um, uh,
Congressman Carter.
he's climbed the ranks. He's been a small town mayor, mayor of Pooler, which is just outside of Savannah. He's been in the Georgia General Assembly, in Congress. I probably know less about him than the other two just because he's from the other side of the state for me. But I've kind of watched him. I interviewed him back in September. Um, he and Collins were jockeying for the Trump endorsement. And I don't think that endorsement in that race has come out. And I don't think there's been a Trump endorsement in that race. So I think they're still jockeying. Dooley's also jockeying for it to some degree. But the two congressmen have both been hardcore Trump supporters in Congress. And then you get to Dooley, and he's fascinating to me because I'm an old sports guy. And there's a story. I was walking him to his truck, and he's riding all over Georgia in his black pickup truck. And I was talking to him after a breakfast event he had walked to, and he had his jackets, he had everything on a travel bar in the back of that truck. And I said, this got to get old. He goes, Chuck, this is exactly what I've been doing the last 30 years. I'm in Columbus in the morning. I'm in LaGrange for lunch. I'm in Rome for dinner. That's what I've been doing. I've been hitting high schools on the road for 30 years recruiting. This is no different. And he said, he talked to Senator Tuberville before he got in the race. And he said Tuberville assured him that the campaigning was going to be easier for him because of what he had done as a college coach recruiting. And I think that's proven true, but the numbers aren't there. And right now, question is, do they get there? And, I think right now, a coach wouldn't say this, but I think he's playing for second place to try to get in a runoff. I think that would be a victory for Dooley right now. And if he could somehow find his way into that second position, I think it's gonna be hard for either one of the congressmen to get to 50+1. I don't know what Spencer thinks, but I think it's gonna be difficult.
Well, let's go back to Spence, because that's a good question with so many undecided. You got 40% undecided, Spencer. What do you think about the coach thinking he may be able to finish second?
I think it's an interesting strategy, and it comes back to what each state election laws are. And so here we're looking at getting 50% threshold to be able to win it outright, or you go to the runoff. We have an election in North Carolina where you have to get to 30% or you're going to, to win it outright. So each state's got their laws, their rules, and you got to play within those rules. And that's not a bad strategy to go, considering he's down 20 points to the lead horse. He does have Governor Kemp's endorsement, I understand, and Kemp is still popular, particularly within the Republican Party, but statewide as well. We've got him at a +20 we'll talk about. So he potentially could ride those coattails to get to 20-25%, and that should be enough to come over Carter and then get to that runoff potential.
And Chuck, talk about that endorsement, because besides that initial endorsement, has Governor Kemp been out there doing anything else?
He has been. He's been at events, everything from Georgia tailgates in the fall. But he doesn't just, Spencer, have Governor Kemp's support. He's got Kemp's apparatus. That's a little different. He's got Kemp people working with him. And I saw Governor Kemp, he was in Columbus last week at a Pratt & Whitney job announcement. And Governor Kemp, I asked him about the governor's political race. And he said his only concern right now is to get Derek Dooley in the U.S. Senate seat. And I said, well, what about the governor's race? He said, I'll support whoever the Republican nominee is. My concern is Derek Dooley in the Senate race. So I think with that back, the Kemp apparatus is it's got a track record, let's just say, and a pretty good one. And I suspect that apparatus, we're qualifying in Georgia this week, Chris. When that qualifying period ends, you will see a sprint to May 19th in the primary. And I think you will see the Kemp folks all in with Dooley.
Now the sitting, that's interesting stuff, Chuck. I appreciate that. Great insight. And the sitting U.S. Senator right now is Democrat Jon Ossoff, and who's really not done anything to anger Georgians to, say, I'm going to come out and vote against them. So, Spence, you did some polling on which candidate would be best, and this against Jon Ossoff. And you know what? I was kind of surprised to see the results based on what you have for who's winning the race right now.
Well, yeah, if we take a look at these head-to-head matchups between those three Republicans, Ossoff is leading all three, but by differing margins. You can see as he goes against Carter, he's at 47. He picks up another point against Collins, gets to 48. Against Dooley, he's at 49. So as we're talking about Dooley's candidacy, he's got a lot of work to do compared to Collins and Carter as it comes to the general election as well. So Dooley's got a lot of work in the primary, the general election, but while Ossoff is below that 50% threshold, he's really knocking at that door. And you can see that the Republicans are still in those low 40s. I chalk some of that up to a divisive primary. So you're going to see those numbers probably tighten around the Republicans and move them up a little bit. But still, it looks like Ossoff is the favorite as we go into the 26 election cycle.
What do you think, Chuck, about those numbers and each candidate's chance against Jon Ossoff and Ossoff himself?
I was surprised Ossoff wasn't at 50 on any of them. I thought that was telling to me, although he's on the door. I mean, he's on the doorstep. You're right, Spencer. But I think 6 years ago, Ossoff took down a Trump-backed candidate in David Perdue, and it took down somebody who appeared to have deep Georgia roots. And he has spent Jon Ossoff has spent the last 6 years working on military issues. Now, he has voted with the Biden votes all the way through, but he has worked heavily on military issues, which is a big deal in Georgia, and military housing in particular, which is a big deal among NCOs and the enlisted ranks. So he's got some things he will be able to point to that are bipartisan in nature. And I think that's sort of what he's trying to do right now is push toward the center issues that get him support from the independents in the middle. And I think if you look, what is it, 9-10%, Spencer, that are undecided, all he needs is 2% of those pretty much, and he's over, right?
And Ossoff, he's winning the independents by 16 points. He's winning the female vote by about 12 points. So you can start to see the coalition that the Democrats have out there. He's building that in a stronger place, and that's why he's the favorite as we go into the election cycle, which is surprising considering this is a state that Donald Trump wins in 24. So this is the one where the Republicans think they have a chance to take back a Senate seat. So that's going to make it a pretty expensive race, I figure, by the end of the day.
Well, Ossoff has got 20 million plus in the bank, and the other candidates have under 10 million really to fight against them just in their own funds. And Chuck,
go ahead, Chuck.
Go ahead, Spence.
Yeah. I was going to say, they do get them after the primaries. I'm not concerned about the Republicans having the money. The super PACs will come in if they think that this is a race that they can win. North Carolina is going to spend $300 million on their Senate race. Texas just spent $100 million in a primary. So I think the money will show up if the Republicans have a chance. But if they don't, you're going to see them spend money in other states because they have to defend that Senate, and they don't want to lose those 4 seats to give back the Senate to the Democrats. So there's a lot at stake, and we're going to follow those numbers to see if it can tighten up. And if it does, we'll see probably a push by the Republicans.
Final thought?
What's interesting to me, Chris and Spencer, is a year and a half ago, Ossoff was on the endangered list as probably the most vulnerable of the Democratic senators. And now he appears to, if he's not on terra firma, he is certainly on more solid ground than he was a year and a half ago. I mean, is that accurate assessment?
Yeah, well, I mean, out of all of the states, this is the one where the Republicans think they have a real chance to pick up. The other states, Ohio, Maine or North Carolina, Ohio or Texas, those are all Iowa. These are states the Republicans are defending. So you presume that the Republicans are going to put the pressure on Ossoff, but it looks like Ossoff is responding in kind with these strong poll numbers, and that might scare the Republicans from spending money here. Well, they have to spend it in other states.
Well, that is the Senate race in Georgia. Interesting numbers and analysis. Thanks, Chuck. But we've got more. We've got the governor's race and how that's going to break down, and who has the potential to break out of this group on both the Democrat and Republican side. We will be right back with more from Georgia polling with Emerson College polling director Spencer Kimball and Chuck Williams. Welcome back to Political Power Ranker, where we have Georgia on our minds today. Chris Berg, Political Director for Next Star Media Group, Spencer Kimball, Emerson College Polling Director, and Chuck Williams, reporter extraordinaire from Columbus, Georgia. Has been in an industry as longer than Moses was around. So he actually saw the tablets. It was first report on the tablets when he came down from the mountain. True story. Honest
I
to
was here
goodness.
when the Chattahoochee River was a stream.
There you go. Let's talk more Georgia polling. Spence, you've got the Republican Party and our Republican polling numbers here for governor. Let's talk about those.
Yeah, so this is Brian Kemp. He's term limited, and so we have an open seat. And the Republicans have a very interesting race because Burt Jones, my understanding, has got the Trump endorsement and was the idea that he could run away with this race. But Rick Jackson jumps into this race, and I'll let Chuck explain who these folks are. But Rick Jackson just jumps in this race, and he's at 20%. Brad Raffensperger, we're probably familiar with him from the 2020 election controversies in Georgia. He pretty much went against the Trump wishes, and he sees himself and we see it in the numbers, he's the outsider within the party, collecting a certain percentage of the vote that way. So we've got generally a 3-horse race. Chris Carr is down there at 6%, a large number of undecided voters still. And it'll be interesting to hear Chuck's perspective on these 3 or 4 candidates that he wants to talk about.
Yeah, Chuck, let's talk about those and let's start with Rick Jackson because he pledged he's going to put 50 million of his own money into this race. Whether he does or not, that's a whole nother story. But he's a wealthy guy. He started a farmer's staffing company for healthcare companies. So talk to us about him.
He's really rich, Chris. Really, really rich. This is one of those interesting races. Everybody thought Burt Jones was the guy with the money in this race. And then all of a sudden, Rick Jackson comes into the race totally out of the blue 4 or 5 weeks ago. And I think one of the Democratic operatives said, we're about to find out how much money Burt Jones's daddy really has. And 40 million is what we're hearing on the ad buys. And a lot of Atlanta, but he's in Columbus, Savannah, Augusta. Anywhere you go in our great state, you will see a Rick Jackson commercial. And starting about Thanksgiving, there was this pack that started attacking Burt Jones, mostly in Atlanta's TV market. And it was just attack after attack after attack. And what happened was that pack, and nobody has claimed credit for it, but there's some things that look pretty obvious right now. In retrospect, that pack spent about $17 million and framed Jones in a very negative light, keeping up with the Joneses and talking about data center money and land deals and all this kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden, Rick Jackson says, I'm in. And then all of a sudden you get these ads, grew up in Techwood homes, foster kid, rags to riches, this whole, I'm just like President Trump. I don't owe anybody anything. All of that framing and messaging, and he's doing it literally all over our state. So he has stepped in, and I think it's interesting because 2120 looks like a dead heat to me. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So he went from 0 to 20 in 4 weeks with millions and millions of dollars. There's no telling how much money he will spend going forward. Jones is the lieutenant governor. He's a known political commodity. Going back to, you can't have a race in Georgia without having a football guy in it. Burt Jones was a captain of one of the UGA football teams. So, it is what it is. I mean, so you've got these 2 guys with huge money. Brad Raffensperger is not a poor man. He is a wealthy man himself, and he can spend some of his own money. I'm not sure he's willing to spend that much of his own money, but you got people in this race that have enormous personal wealth.
And just to flesh that out, Jackson is picking up older votes in the independents. Jones is with the male vote and the Republicans. So they've carving out their lanes as well in far as creating their bases of support to try to build off of.
So that's the Republican field. Interesting dynamics going on. Let's move over to the Democratic field for governor. It's a wide open race. Term limited Governor Brian Kemp is done after this cycle. And Spencer, what do we see?
Well, you have an interesting dynamic in this race. One is former Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms. She's got a pretty strong lead here in our polling, about a 20-point lead over Jeff Duncan, who I'll have Chuck talk about, the Republican, now Democrat. But what you saw when Duncan got in that race was Estevez and Bottoms really went after him pretty quickly. And the reason is that he's at 13%. He's already at second place. So that's where you can start to see some movement within the Democratic side. But it looks like Lance Bottoms has got 48% of the black vote in the Democratic primary. That probably gives her enough of a cushion to get closer to that 50% threshold in the primary. But we'll see which alternative, who comes out. Is it Duncan, Thurman, Estevez, Jackson? Who comes out as the alternative to Bottoms and maybe gives her a little bit more competition for this nomination?
Does she get to 50%, Chuck?
You know, if you forced me to make a bet, I would say no. And I think I've interviewed all of them. I've interviewed the top four in that race. Estevez, who has Columbus connections, former state senator. Mike Thurman, who was labor commissioner. He is a fix-it guy. He's in his 70s. He was a fix-it guy in DeKalb County with both the county government as well as the school system. Just a very much known fix-it guy. And then you've got Duncan, who was the Republican lieutenant governor, who one of his key financial supporters 8 years ago was Rick Jackson. You know, but Duncan has jumped into this. And if there was a poster child for a never Trumper, it's Jeff Duncan. He did a lot of national media. I think he was on CNN as a retainer or something, but he was doing a lot of CNN stuff for a good period of time. And he switched parties. Republicans tried to kick him out, and he just went on his own. But he became a Democrat. He is running an electability campaign. He's trying to tell people, okay, you're tired of losing, right? You know, Democrats haven't won in nearly 3 decades. You're tired of losing. Who's the one guy who can win when you get to November? That's the case he's making. I mean, whether it sticks or not, it's absolutely 100%. I'm the most electable.
Interesting stuff. And there's really not been any endorsements in the Democratic side either. No one has come forward. Emily's list, it looks like, for Keisha Lance Bottoms, but that's about it. Where's Kamala Harris? Where are the other leading Democrats?
Where's Stacey Abrams, Chris?
Or Stacey Abrams, yeah.
That's a great question.
We need an answer, Chuck. I'm looking for you for an answer.
I have no idea where Miss Abrams is.
But it is interesting.
For the first time in 8 years, Spencer, you're not talking about her. I mean, in the way that you have in previous cycles.
Well, yeah, her last election kind of sealed the deal that her time had passed, and losing by 7-8 points, and not as competitive, obviously, as the first time around.
One of the things you said when we were talking beforehand, I hope I'm not speaking out of school, you said the Texas race had some Abrams feel to it in the way that one of the campaigns was being run. Is that fair? I mean,
well, that's the idea was that the Jasmine Crockett campaign down in Texas for that U.S. Senate nomination on the Democratic side was running a very Abrams style campaign, leaning into that black vote, particularly the black female vote, and getting out that vote at a high propensity. But we're going to find out tonight if Crockett's able to use that strategy out in Texas and be able to pull out a larger black vote within the Democratic primary. Time will tell.
Well, I want to do a couple quick slides, one last quick slide on the Trump and Kemp favorability. Let's look at that real quick, and then we'll go up and down. Spencer,
sure, this is really important because you can see that Trump is underwater in the state. He's down about 9 points. Kemp is pretty favorable. He's up about 20. But within the Republican primary voters, Trump is more favorable than Kemp. So within the primary, you have to still stay with Trump. But then when you get to the general, if you're too Trumpy, that might be a problem. And we're going to see who can kind of thread that needle in both the governor and the Senate race for those Republicans.
And that matters with the endorsements is where they land right now. So it'll be very fun to watch. Real quick, Spence, who's up and who's down this week? We got 1 minute.
That's great. So up this week is Jon Ossoff. He's going up for re-election. He was the target of the Republican Party. He seems to be comfortable in being for his re-elect. So we have Senator Ossoff up this week.
And who's down?
Down this week, we have Derek Dooley. Even though there is a pathway, we were talking about his strategy of getting to the runoff, he's going to need Governor Kemp's support to get into that 20-25% range and get over into that runoff potential. So at this point, though, at 10%, we have him down.
Chuck, you got 10 seconds. One last word.
Go Dogs. I mean, what do you say down here? I guess. It's going to be fun to watch, Chris. This is going to be an incredibly good, interesting election cycle.
It is going to be fun to watch in Georgia. All right, everyone. Thank you very much for watching another edition of Political Power Ranker. Watch us each week. You can follow us right here on our social media channels. We bring fresh polling data for statewide important races across the country every week. So tune us in. Thank you, Spencer. Thank you, Chuck. We'll see you next week.